Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. We usually look at disasters as isolated, one-off events. But today, we're going to synthesize four totally distinct global events from August 2026 into one cohesive narrative. Because when you actually lay them out side by side, some incredibly fascinating and frankly tragic patterns start to emerge about human nature, the systems we build, and how we respond to absolute chaos.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're hitting 5 stops. First, paper certificates, real tragedies. Then, ignoring deadly red flags. Third, the high cost of gold. Fourth, documenting the disaster. And finally, learning from the ruins.
Let's jump right into part 1. Paper certificates, real tragedies, and the illusion of safety in Bangladesh.
We're starting in Sitakunda, Bangladesh, at a ship recycling facility. Now, on paper, this place was pristine. It had the proper ISO management certificates, it looked incredibly safe. But in reality, it was a literal death trap. To understand what's really at stake here, consider the dismantled LNG carrier known as the MT Razi. 9 workers died inside that hole inhaling toxic gas, and one of those workers was a severely vulnerable 17-year-old boy. We're talking about massive systemic failures in age verification and basic hazard management that literally cost young people their lives.
And the contrast between what's supposed to happen and what actually happened is just horrific. You've got the strict protocols of the Hong Kong Convention. On one side, stuff like mandatory hazard inventories and purging liquid residuals. But the lethal reality was that liquid waste just sat there, generating highly toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. This stuff can knock you unconscious instantly. And tragically, these workers were sent into an enclosed space without respirators, without atmospheric testing, and with 0 standby rescue teams.
A piece from the South Asia Journal really hits the nail on the head here. They noted that a green yard certificate is, quote, proof of nothing more than a piece of paper unless it's backed up by daily enforcement and legitimate worker rights. The takeaway here? A fancy certificate absolutely cannot save lives if the economic pressure to scrap steel for profit overrides basic common sense.
Moving on to Section 2, ignoring deadly red flags, focusing on the Lake Kariba ferry disaster.
So what happens when the danger isn't hiding down in a ship's hull, but is actively blowing right in your face? Let's travel over to Zimbabwe, to Lake Kariba, on August 11th. A ferry sets sail. It only has one working engine. The winds are whipping at 29 kilometers per hour, literally blowing electrical equipment off the dock into the water. And to make matters worse, it was authorized for 90 people, but they crammed at least 114 adults, 5 crew members, and an unspecified number of children on board. This was staggering, undeniable negligence before it even left the dock.
And it escalated so rapidly. By 1 p.m., passengers were practically begging the captain to turn back because the conditions were so severe. He flat out refused. Just 30 minutes later, at 1:30 p.m., that single engine swamped. The bilge pump went under. The boat turned broadside and completely capsized. It took another 30 minutes for rescue boats from Tashinga to even arrive and pull desperate survivors, many without life jackets, off the overturned hull.
The result of ignoring those glaring red flags? Over 97 fatalities. 97. Cementing this as the deadliest transport disaster in Zimbabwe's entire history, and completely crippling a vital trade route to the rural community of Chilala. Now, the government did step in. President Emerson Mnangagwa declared a state of disaster and openly acknowledged their severe maritime capability deficits. They promised to replace the vessel and fix up alternative roads. So that's what a state response looks like. But it begs a really dark question. What happens when there is absolutely no state oversight at all?
Which brings us to Section 3, the high cost of gold and the unregulated mines of the Central African Republic.
In the car, extreme unemployment drives desperate people into what's called artisanal mining. Now, that might sound like a quaint hobby, but it is not. It is grueling, highly illegal extraction deep underground, operating completely outside government control. There isn't a single structural safety standard in place. People are doing this just to save their families from starvation.
And the human toll is devastating. According to Gervais Genagoro, a local Red Cross volunteer, they've recovered at least 100 bodies from an avalanche of collapsed underground tunnels in the village of Zamboya. Men and women, just trying to feed their families, instantly buried under tons of sand and earth. And the rescue efforts? Talk about an impossible paradox. Rescuers and local officials were racing to extract survivors, but they needed massive tractors to move the sheer volume of soil. But here's the catch. The heavy vibrations from that machinery risked collapsing whatever fragile air pockets might still be keeping people alive down there.
As one local youth council member put it, finding anyone alive at that point would be nothing short of a miracle.
All right, Section 4, documenting the disaster and how we make sense of all this chaos.
When we shift away from the physical destruction, we have to ask, how do we actually convey this human impact to the world without just being sensational? Well, after a massive 7.4 magnitude earthquake in Cali, Colombia, the Associated Press deployed a brilliant multi-layered strategy. They got rapid live video of evacuations in Bogotá, mobilized visual teams straight to the hardest-hit rubble in Cali and Pereira, and rapidly verified user-generated videos from actual survivors.
But here's where it gets really interesting. They took all those field dispatches and turned them into a creative 500-word being there piece. It was a tightly written Q&A that centered entirely on the communities bearing the brunt of the destruction. By focusing heavily on visceral, human interest storytelling, the media can actually transform raw data into an empathetic narrative. It connects us, the global audience, directly to the survivors standing in the ruins of their homes.
Finally, Section 5, learning from the ruins, the true anatomy of a crisis.
So, what's the big takeaway from synthesizing these tragic events? Whether we're looking at the illusion of paper safety in a Bangladesh shipyard that killed 9 workers, ignoring active red flags on a Zimbabwe lake that cost over 97 lives, or the total lack of oversight in a CAR gold mine that buried 100-plus people, the common thread is clear. Systemic negligence always exacts an overwhelming human toll. Safety isn't just a piece of paper, it's a daily practice.
I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder long after this explainer ends. When a safety certificate doesn't actually equal protection and a deadly, blaring warning doesn't stop a departure, what will it actually take to place human lives above the cost of doing business? Whether you're looking at global supply chains or local transport, always ask yourself, who is verifying the safety and who is truly bearing the risk? Thanks for joining me today. Keep asking the tough questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.